Okay, a little cleanup from yesterday. I took a pretty good beating, which is all right. The object is to have a conversation. The object is to make people aware of what's going on. And certainly the John Bolton nomination for the NSA is worthy of consideration, reflection, and perhaps some anxiety, as I obviously had. There were those of you who felt that I was over the top and that I had suddenly tossed the towel, and that's not the case. I mean, I hold out hope and give energy to, give the weight of my being, whatever it is, to a positive and peaceful resolution of our dilemma in the United States. No question about it. And I still give hope to President Trump, as I said yesterday. It is unsettling to me that you have Goldman Sachs wrapped around one half of him and these neocons wrapped around the other side. And the fact that he seems to be able to winnow between them and operate is amazing. Nobody else could do it. And some have pointed out that obviously he's a guy who worked with the mafia in New York to do building and construction and came out relatively unscathed, and that is also amazing. So let me say to you, I am not surprised, but was dumbfounded that it was actually there, and it's hard to imagine that Trump can clean everything up with the worst actors. But some of you pointed out some very good things, and I give credence to that. One is obviously that something I echoed, or that you echoed that I said, which is keep your enemies closer. And is he doing that? Some of you pointed out that he has a way, that is, President Trump has a way of pointing people, using them, getting the information he needs, and discarding them. Is that what he's doing? You know, the NSA is a really, really critical place, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But it's a hard place to use somebody and discard them, because you give them the tools to the ranch, basically. They get the shop. Some of you quoted both Steve Piesniak and Mike Cernovich, who had warmer things to say than I did. And obviously those guys are both linked in interesting ways to the insiders. I give some deference to them, of course. I have my own misgivings about Piesniak sometimes, but Mike Cernovich certainly is a source and from all apparent outward circumstances, a trustworthy guy. So can he deal with the bad actors? You know, he probably can. But Bolton is not only a neocon, he is not only a 9/11 player, and that makes him an accomplice, at least after the fact, to the biggest act of treason in the United States over the last 20 years, and perhaps over the last century. He is not only a warmonger, he's also a warmonger. And at a time when Syria is burning, Russia is aligned on the other side, the challenges are there. We certainly don't need a third world war. Some say we're already in it, but we don't need a third world nuclear war. We've got North Korea, which Bolton has in the past, as I recall, given lots of opportunity to say and said, you know, we just need to go in after them. And then you've got Iran, which is right on the plate, ready for that many are clamoring, that the warmongers are clamoring for going after. And like many of virtually all of the neocons, the bushy boy neocons, these guys have never been in war themselves, but they sure don't have any problem sending our military and risking innocents on both sides to the process. So And while I'm saying this, some of you who may feel I'm picking on the Republicans, I have no greater deference for the neocons than I do for the Obama Democrats, and they are every bit as bad. Let's never forget that. And what that does is tell us that the deep state is on both sides. Again, do we need to be reminded? But as it relates to me saying things, we certainly need to say, hey, look, this is not a one-sided deal. I had somebody post last night that said most of the people that are posting must not be Republicans. Well, I don't think that's the case. I think probably most of the people following the Trump positive aspect are in some fashion either conservatives or Republicans, or are liberals and Democrats who feel that their country is at risk. And but in any case, we're not picking on the Republicans because we pick on George W. Bush. I mean, let's get over it. He's as bad as they get. So the only thing I can think about this that benefits Trump is that, as I would see it, Bolton is subject to the hammer. He is subject to treason. He is an accomplice after the fact, at the very least. He was a participant in the process. It is hard for him to consider that he may have deniability, and if that serves to give Trump strength in saying, hey, look, you'll do what you're told, man, I'm all for it. All right, issue number 2, which is part of the thumbnail, we go back to something that Q pointed out, which is this whole Five Eyes thing. And it is that our agencies are linked with other secretive and surveillance agencies in New Zealand, Australia, Canada, and Great Britain. And that the 5 of them play with each other and use each other as facilitators to do their dirty work when they're supposedly not supposed to do it. So the CIA is not supposed to operate in the United States, but if you can get MI5 or MI6 to do it, if you can get the New Zealanders to do it and hand it off, then you have deniability, right? And so you do the wink, wink, nod, nod, gee, would you help me out, give me this information, and then you say, oh gosh, we bumped up against this because a fellow agency across the water came up with it. Well, what is pointed out today, and it's the Gateway Pundit, and the Gateway Pundit I'm going to give you a link to because this is a good article and there's no sense in me giving you point-by-point detail, but let me give you some fine points to it. Julian Assange yesterday dropped a bunch of tweets, and the tweets include information about the British involvement in the whole Trump dossier. And it goes, what they first point out is that Trump not only had to run against the Republicans, the Obama regime, the Clinton crime family, the corrupt MSM, the media, and the globalist leaders, and everybody throughout the world that thought he was unfit to be president, but we voted for him anyway. And the United States said, we need to try to do something different. So Assange points out that there are some players that were involved in this process right from the outset, and shows us a guy named Joseph Mifsud and how he links to the United Kingdom, how he's linked with Theresa May and with Boris Johnson, who's a big player. Theresa May is the Prime Minister of Great Britain. He points out that Mifsud and Riyadh formed a think tank for the Saudi intelligence, and they worked with Prince Turki Al Faisal. It points out that they were parties to training, and that they were all linked that way. That Mifsud, the same guy, and Claire Smith of the United Kingdom Joint Intelligence Committee trained Italian security, and of course have deep links. And that it was Alexander Downer in London, closely associated with Hakluyt, now the Holdingham Group Limited, a private MI6 outfit that met with Papadopoulos to put all this together, and that the FBI used Alexander Downer's statement about MISFUD in order to gain FISA access as to go against the Trump camp. So all of these guys are linked, and so here you have not only the Five Eyes, but you have Saudi linkage as well. And the former agent, Christopher Steele, who was the front man for all of this, and who was the one that worked with the Hillary Clinton campaign, is also MI6. So here these guys are passing the baton, trying to use it against a candidate in somebody else's country, and taking it out and using it to try to influence the election. I mean, take a look at this. Think about this. The so-called Russians spent a couple $1 million playing games on Facebook, and we have spent 15 months now pounding away at all the terrible things the Russians did to interfere with our election, when in fact the Trump dossier and the Russian source of it came from the Obama administration, the Clinton administration, the Brits, the MI6 folks, and now Theresa May and the administration of Great Britain. So they're all playing games. And you recall that Trump canceled a trip to Great Britain, and there was some question about whether or not he was at risk. Well, there may be some good reason for that, and not only that it was some outside Muslim influenced terrorists, but that it was the insiders in MI6 or in the Theresa May government itself. So Assange also points out that the UK government approved giving Steele the dossier for the Obama administration and of course for the Clintons, and that the UK government that issued a press suppression notice to show that Steele, to try to hide the fact that Steele and the Brits were linked. And then he points out that Steele used former UK Ambassador Sir Andrew Wood to funnel the dossier to Senator Jockstrap McStain, which is another way that it came around the backside. So the Brits not only worked with the insiders, not only worked with linkages to Russia, not only worked with Steele, but worked it through the agencies, through MI6 and through the UK government to get it both to Clinton, Obama, and also to Jockstrap McStain, who brought it over and handed it to the Department of Justice again, of course. So here it is, and they're pointing out that Wood was running around all over the Middle East and through Eastern Europe playing games, and that the government in UK verified the dossier. So they not only did they foment it, not only did they originate it, not only did they build it up, not only did they pass it both to our former administration, the Obama administration, and the Clinton campaign, and give it to McStain, but they also gave some credence to it and tipped their hands that said it's valid. And this goes clear back to 9/11, which of course always bothers me, and that's the whole thing about Tony Blair and the yellow cake and the tubes and the rest of this that gave some credence to going after Iraq for weapons of mass destruction, when of course it had all been discounted, and the Brits winked and nodded and dropped their head and acted like they didn't know that it had already been discounted, while the Bush administration ran around and said, see, they've got yellow cake uranium. So it's okay for us to give yellow cake uranium to the Russians and to sell it, but we shouldn't. We can lie about it going into Iraq and get an opportunity to totally destroy the entire Middle East. So it's all really good stuff. So Assange points out that Brennan may also have linkages, and that Assange now says, we have concrete evidence yet now, this is the most, of shadowy actors using dirty tricks in order to rig elections. But these characters aren't operating from Moscow. Instead, they are British, Eton educated, and have close ties to Her Majesty. So it's not only Theresa May, it's not only the British government, it's not only the Prime Minister, it's MI6 and the Queen. So here we are. Isn't that a wonderful setup? So I'm putting the thumbnail on the Five Eyes. Take a look at it if you will. But we certainly have all kinds of dangerous things wrapping it around. And if Trump can winnow his way through this and actually use crazy actors like Bolton to make this world better, I mean, more power to him. I give him all of my energy to that end. And for some of you that feel that we're running to alternatives, what I have said is not to toss the entire process away, not to give up hope, but not to put all of our eggs in one basket. It is never a good idea to put all of our eggs in one basket as I see it. And so getting organized, getting the rest of this stuff put together, making ourselves more viable independently, providing a separate force for change, and either using that to reinforce and help the president and his administration, or doing it on our own for our own greatest benefit, because after all, we are the citizens, are both beneficial. So look, I'm not looking at tossing the towel in on Trump. What I'm saying is, I don't want to just sit here and watch, as some do, saying, rah, rah, there goes Q, and everything's going to work, and all we need to do is play videos and deal with cryptic responses, and we're the great citizens of the West. I don't believe that that's all we need to do. So thank you so much for watching. Thanks for sticking with me, even though some have not. Give a thumbs up if you like. This is a hopeful message, and subscribe if you will, and let's go forward. I will have stuff on FDR over the next few days. I have some interesting alignments on the economic aspects of it from 33 to 39. I am going to go in depth to the Pearl Harbor massacre and what Roosevelt may have known. We're going to take a look at the Pandamopoly thing, which you can see my map in the back. Sometime this next week or so, I'm going to reactivate it, and I think you're going to love the way it unfolds the process and lets us know how our country and the world have been turned upside down over the last 100 years. So thanks so much for watching. I look forward to your responses.